What we're looking at today in Warthunder is the Su-25SM3. This is a strike aircraft in rank 8 of the Soviet tech tree at battle rating 11.7, added to the game with the Alpha Strike update in early 2024. This plane gets a fully modern ballistics computer, a built-in laser designator with a 36x optical zoom, and the SPO-150 16M radar warning receiver. This is a far more modern unit than most other Soviet lineage aircraft get, and it includes a missile approach warning system and direction-based tracking into the L-band, which makes it very useful against SPAA. Its cannon is the GSH-32, with 250 rounds of ammo. It's a reasonably hard-hitting gun that you've probably seen before in the Soviet tech tree, and you get all of the usual ammo belts. For loadouts, it's a frickin' smorgasbord of air-to-ground missiles, dumb bombs, air-to-air missiles, gun pods, drop tanks, and rocket pods. You get 8 underwing pylons to mix and match. The air-to-air missile you get is the R-73, which is the best dogfighting missile in the game as of making this review. It has 40 Gs of pull, insane high off-bore sight targeting and tracking, and even without the helmet-mounted targeting, it's a very effective weapon. In terms of guided air-to-ground ordnance, you get a whole bunch of options. For TV-guided weapons, you can take the CAB 500 KRE TV-guided bombs or the KH-29TE long-range TV-guided missile. Both of these are very effective weapons with large warheads, but just remember that these weapons need to maintain a clear line of sight to the target since neither have inertial tracking. Weather and smoke are going to be considerations. For laser-guided weapons, you get 3 different laser-guided missiles. The S-25L are the basic low-yield rockets, with the KH-25ML being the next level up. The 25ML flies at Mach 2 and has an effective range a bit under 10 kilometers, along with a pretty strong warhead. The KH-29 is a much larger laser-guided missile with an enormous warhead and a similar max range of a little under 10 kilometers. Again, none of these weapons have inertial tracking, so you're going to have to maintain a laser lock in order to score a reliable hit. The new member of the family is the KH-38. This is a long-range air-to-ground missile, and you get 2 versions. The KH-38ML is laser-guided, and you can fire this thing reliably from out over 15 kilometers, but just remember, it's kinda difficult to both get and maintain an accurate target laze out at that distance. This is a case where the weapon is limited by the aircraft firing it, because on paper, its actual capable range is much farther. The KH-38MT is infrared guided, and in my experience, it can reliably lock targets at around 10 kilometers or so, although you can shoot them from much farther away using the inertial guidance and just hope that the target cooperates with the infrared seeker once the missile gets in close. Both versions of the KH-38 have inertial tracking, which dramatically increases their combat utility, and both have big enough high explosive warheads to blow up a main battle tank in one hit. The flight performance on this jet is basically the same as other variants of the Su-25. There are some minor differences in weights and such, but speaking generally, you won't actually notice any of that, and flying it out in the game feels almost exactly the same as the earlier versions of the basic Su-25. This is still very much a subsonic jet, and it hits a structural redline below Mach 1 despite the fact that it's a heavy, armored jet that can sometimes bounce off missile hits, but I guess you can't fly it too fast for whatever reason. The energy retention and sustained turn performance is pretty bad, and while you can sometimes get one singular tense good energy turn out of it when it's unloaded, if you get sucked into like a twisting dogfight or something like that, it's not going to end well. The engine power on this jet creates an odd dichotomy where its maximum speed doesn't actually suffer too much in level flight when you're carrying a full weapon load, and its climb performance is only going to take a mediocre impact, but its overall flight performance is still pretty weak even unloaded, and the structural redline under 1,000 kilometers an hour is a major issue. especially if you need to enter a dive to push an attack with a laser-guided weapon or something. Thankfully, the air brake works great, and you can push the throttle up to 104% at the risk of overheating pretty quickly, so overall, speed management isn't a huge problem once you practice a little. Taking this plane out into air battles, well, you're at a very high battle rating, so basically every other plane is going to be significantly faster. You'll only very rarely make it to the bases, both because of your teammates' speed and the speed of enemy planes intercepting you, so I generally don't recommend this for base bombing. Going after AI ground units with rocket pods or guided weapons is still sometimes viable, just don't hesitate to dump your weapon load if somebody jumps you. In air combat, this jet is a whale. Almost everything you fight can outperform you, but the R-73 is still a total beast in air combat. No helmet-mounted sight, but if you can maneuver for a lock, it'll still get you kills. It's also worth mentioning that the new KH-38 can be used to attack aircraft, but it's not easy or reliable. I got a few kills with the KH-38MT in evaluating this plane, but it wasn't consistent, and air-to-surface missiles don't usually pull very well in air combat. For close air support, at its current battle rating, this jet is way more effective for close air support than it is in air battles. The huge selection of different guided weapons gives you the tools for almost any playstyle, and the KH-38 in particular is highly effective, but there are still a couple of caveats. The laser designator is mounted in the nose, just like other Su-25s. It's got a stronger zoom, but the targeting area is still limited to basically right in front of the jet. So if you're using a laser-guided weapon, you still need to be flying towards the target until it hits. And if I'm being honest, I still sometimes forget to slow down with the air brakes and stuff when I'm lasing up a target. As I've alluded in reviewing other Su-25 jets, the pilot workload is still a little bit higher than some other close air support planes, and it'll take a little practice to get good with this thing. Out in the real world, the Su-25SM was envisioned as a lower-cost upgrade for older Su-25 airframes in the early 2000s. It added a new combat computer, expanded weapons compatibility, a dramatically upgraded defensive system with a modern radar warning receiver, and a full engine overhaul. This generally succeeded in extending the life of older Su-25 airframes, but as newer systems became available, it was clear that further upgrades would still be needed. The SM3 version came starting in 2018, with further upgrades to the combat computer and a totally new laser optic targeting unit with thermal imaging and the ability to track moving targets automatically. Most of the other electronic systems received at least a minor upgrade or a midlife replacement, and as usual, some internal structural elements of the plane were replaced in order to extend the service life for a few more years. Visually, it's an Su-25. Only one paint job at the moment, but otherwise it looks just like all the other Su-25 variants in the game. Landing is fairly simple, again, just like earlier Su-25s. You can drop gear and flaps a little over 400 kilometers an hour, and you get a double drag chute combined with the air brakes, so the landing run is pretty short. It's still a heavy jet though, so if you lose an engine or something, you might have to land with a bit more throttle than you're used to. The cockpit is actually really good. The rearward visibility still sucks, but the HUD is useful and the two MFDs are in convenient positions. I actually had a pretty easy time getting kills in ground battles flying in VR, and overall I really like the cockpit on this for a strike jet. To close out on the Su-25SM3. This jet has incredibly strong air-to-ground weapons. It's got tons of countermeasures, and one of the best defensive sensor sets currently in the game. However, it's still not very maneuverable, it's still crazy slow, and as of making this review, its high battle rating makes it kind of a struggle bus in air battles. The final verdict on the Su-25SM3 is that this jet is incredibly effective at close air support, and its long-range weapons make it a serious threat. But in air battles, it's just over-tiered. As always, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this review, check out this other one.